The first chill of autumn had just started to creep into the air when my car broke down again. It wasn't the first time this year, and I knew deep down it wouldn't be the last. That old sedan had been with me for nearly 15 years, carrying groceries, taking me to church, and driving me to the little doctor's office across town. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, and more importantly, it was the only independence I had left. At my age, relying on others is a constant tug-of-war between gratitude and humiliation. I didn't want to trouble anyone, but each time the car sputtered and failed, I felt my freedom shrinking. That morning, I sat on the side of the road, hands trembling as I tried to call the tow service. My heart ached not just from the breakdown, but from the dread of another bill. My pension barely covered the essentials, and every repair felt like pulling another brick from a crumbling wall. Just as I was about to give up and start the long walk home, a familiar pickup truck pulled over beside me. It was Daniel, my son-in-law. He leaned out the window, flashing that easy smile of his, the one that could charm a stranger into thinking he was the most dependable man alive. "Car trouble, Mom?" he asked, calling me Mom in that casual way he always did, though sometimes it felt more like a performance than affection. I forced a smile. "Yes, she's given up on me again." He hopped out, tall and confident, with grease already staining his jeans from the construction job he'd come from. He lifted the hood without hesitation, whistling low under his breath as if to say, "Good thing I came along." Within minutes, he was elbow-deep in my engine, tools appearing from his truck like magic. "You're lucky I came by," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Mechanics would charge you a fortune for something like this." I nodded, grateful, but also uneasy. It wasn't that I distrusted him entirely. Daniel was good with his hands, always fixing things around the house for my daughter, Emily. But there was something in the way he looked at me that day. Not with kindness, but with calculation, like a chess player studying his next move. Still, I kept those thoughts to myself. Gratitude demanded silence. As the sun dipped lower, Daniel finally slammed the hood shut and turned the key in the ignition. The engine purred back to life, smoother than before. Relief washed over me, and I couldn't help but smile. "Oh, Daniel, I don't know what I'd do without you," I said. He grinned, but there was a flicker in his eyes, something sharp, unreadable. "That's what family's for," he replied. "We look out for each other." He insisted on driving behind me all the way home to make sure the car didn't quit again. At the house, he even carried in my groceries, setting them down neatly on the kitchen counter. It was the kind of help I'd always wished for, someone who cared enough to notice when I was struggling. Over tea, he leaned back in his chair, relaxed and easy, as though the whole day had been nothing but an opportunity for him to play the hero. "You know, Mom," he said, "you've got a lot on your shoulders. Living here alone, keeping up with bills, repairs, everything. It's a lot for someone your age." There it was again. That little edge in his voice. Not cruel, not yet, but probing. Testing the ground. "I manage just fine," I answered softly, stirring sugar into my tea. "I always have." He chuckled. "Of course you do. You're tough. But everyone needs help sometimes." I nodded politely, though his words lingered in my mind like an echo. Why did it feel less like comfort and more like a setup? When Emily came to pick him up later that evening, she hugged me tightly, whispering how lucky I was to have a husband like him. "He's always looking out for you, Mom," she said, smiling as if it were the most obvious truth. I smiled back, but my chest felt heavy. Gratitude and suspicion tangled inside me, pulling in opposite directions. I told myself I was being foolish, that I was simply tired from the day's ordeal. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to the old house creak in the dark, I couldn't shake the memory of Daniel's eyes when the engine roared back to life. Not warm, not protective. Hungry. And though I didn't know it yet, that favor he would soon ask me for would test not just my trust in him, but the very foundation of my family. The days after Daniel fixed my car passed quietly, almost too quietly. For a short while, I allowed myself to believe maybe my worries were unfounded. Maybe he really had just wanted to help me. After all, he hadn't asked for a penny for the work, though I offered several times. He brushed it off with that same smile, the kind that always felt just a little too polished. But I should have known better. It was a Saturday afternoon when he came by again. Emily was with him this time, carrying a bag of groceries and chatting cheerfully, filling my little kitchen with warmth. I busied myself putting things away while Daniel leaned against the counter, watching me with a look that was both casual and deliberate, like he was waiting for the right moment. When Emily stepped into the living room to take a phone call, Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom," he began, lowering his voice as if what he was about to say was for my ears only. "Yes?" I asked, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "You know I've been working on getting my business off the ground," he said smoothly. "Construction contracts, remodeling jobs. I've got big plans. Real big. But banks, they don't make it easy for guys like me. They want collateral. Something solid to back up the loan." I nodded politely, though I wasn't sure why he was telling me this. "That sounds difficult," I said carefully. His eyes narrowed slightly, and then came the words that made my stomach turn. "I was thinking, maybe you could help. Just temporarily. If you signed your house over to me, I could use it as collateral for the loan. Once everything's approved and my business is rolling, I'll sign it right back. No risk to you. You'd be helping family." The room seemed to tilt around me. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misheard him. My house? The little place my husband and I had bought with 30 years of sweat and sacrifice? The one place in the world that was mine? I don't think I understand," I stammered, trying to keep my composure. Daniel leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's just paperwork, Mom. You wouldn't lose anything. I'd still let you live here, of course. But the bank would see me as having the collateral I need. Once the loan goes through, I'll sign it back over. Easy as that. You trust me, don't you?" The way he said those last words sent a chill down my spine. Not as a question, but as a test. I forced a weak smile, my heart pounding in my chest. "Daniel, that's a very big thing to ask. My home is all I have." He shrugged, pretending to be casual, but his eyes gleamed with something sharper. "I know. That's why the bank would take it seriously. Look, I fixed your car, didn't I? I'm just asking you to do this one favor. Family helps family." Just then, Emily re-entered the kitchen, still smiling from her call. Daniel straightened up and said nothing more, as if the moment had never happened. But I caught the quick glance he gave her, the silent warning not to mention our conversation. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after they'd gone home, staring at the deed to my house tucked safely in its folder. My hands trembled as I thought of what Daniel had asked. On the surface, it sounded temporary, almost harmless. But every instinct screamed that once I signed that paper, nothing would ever be the same again. The next day, Emily called. Her voice was lighter than usual, almost rehearsed. "Mom, Daniel told me he mentioned something to you. About the loan. I think it's a really good idea. It'll help us build a future. You'd still be living there, nothing would change. You'd just be doing us this one little kindness." Her words cut deeper than Daniel's. My own daughter, echoing his plea, urging me to give away the only piece of security I had left. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could possibly think I would hand over my house like it was a spare coat. But instead, I simply said, "I'll think about it." After I hung up, I sat in silence, the weight of betrayal pressing heavy on my chest. I had always imagined my daughter would protect me as I grew older, that she'd stand by my side when the world grew harder. Instead, she was standing with him. The next time Daniel came by, he was all charm again. He joked about the weather, fiddled with the latch on my gate, even brought me a pie Emily had baked. But underneath the small talk, I could feel the pressure building. Every smile, every gesture carried an unspoken message. I did you a favor. Now it's your turn. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing his voice, the way he'd said, "You trust me, don't you?" And in that question was the trap. If I said yes, I'd be surrendering everything. If I said no, I'd be painting myself as selfish, ungrateful, unloving. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: whatever Daniel was planning, it wasn't just about a loan. And if I wasn't careful, I could lose far more than just my house. I didn't have to wait long before the pressure began. 2 days after Daniel's unsettling request, Emily came by alone. She let herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago, back when I believed the key represented trust, not intrusion. She carried a box of muffins from the bakery down the street and set them on the table like a peace offering. "Mom," she began with a sweetness that felt forced, "Daniel told me you're still unsure about the loan situation." I kept my eyes on the muffins, not on her. "It's not something I can decide overnight, Emily. It's my home. Everything your father and I worked for is tied to it." She reached across the table, touching my hand. Her voice softened, but I could hear the rehearsed tone beneath it. "I know. But think of it this way: Daniel's business could change our lives. We're talking about a future where we're stable, where we can help you even more. Don't you want to see us succeed? Don't you want to help your grandchildren?" The mention of my grandchildren cut like a knife. She knew how much they meant to me, how I would sacrifice anything to see them thrive. Using them as leverage wasn't just unfair, it was cruel. I pulled my hand back, keeping my voice calm. "Of course I want what's best for them. But risking my house isn't the way. Your father and I bought this place brick by brick. I can't just hand it over, even temporarily." Her expression hardened. "You're overreacting. Daniel isn't trying to take anything from you. He just needs collateral. It's business. You'd still live here, nothing would change." I wanted to tell her how wrong she was, how dangerous it was to trust Daniel with something so important. But I saw the stubborn set of her jaw, the way her eyes flashed with something more than conviction: loyalty. Loyalty not to me, but to him. "Emily," I said gently, "marriage can make you see through rose-colored glasses. But you have to understand, once a paper like that is signed, things do change. Maybe not right away, but eventually." She pushed back from the table, her face flushed. "Why do you always doubt him? Daniel has done nothing but help you. He fixed your car, he's always checking on you, and you still treat him like he's some sort of con man. It's insulting, Mom. He's family." Her words stung, not because of the accusation, but because I could hear Daniel in them. His phrasing, his persuasion, slipping out of my daughter's mouth like she was a puppet repeating his lines. I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence speaks louder than defense. Emily stood, her hands shaking as she grabbed her purse. "I can't believe you'd be so selfish. Do you know how much Daniel sacrifices for us? And the one time he asks for something, you act like he's out to ruin you. I never thought you'd be like this." She left without touching the muffins. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house long after she was gone. The days that followed grew heavier. Emily stopped calling as often, and when she did, her voice was clipped, formal, as if she were speaking to a stranger. Daniel, on the other hand, appeared more frequently. He'd show up unannounced, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with silence, always watching me with those calculating eyes. One evening, he caught me outside watering the little rose bushes my husband had planted years ago. "Mom," he said, his tone smooth but his smile thin, "I know Emily talked to you. She said you're still hesitant. I just want you to understand, this isn't just about me. It's about her too. About the kids. I want to give them the life they deserve. Don't you?" The question was a trap. Say yes, and I'd be agreeing with him. Say no, and I'd be a heartless grandmother. "I do want what's best for them," I said carefully. But giving up my home, that's not something I can do. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. You're making this harder than it has to be. I fixed your car. I didn't charge you. I've been there whenever you needed something. And now, when I ask for help, suddenly you can't return the favor? Doesn't seem fair, does it? There it was, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the threat beneath the charm. I stood my ground. Helping isn't the same as giving up everything. My house is my life. Don't ask me again. He stared at me for a long moment, then forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Of course, Mom. I'd never push you. Just think about it. Emily and I will be back this weekend. Maybe you'll change your mind. As he walked away, I realized the favor he'd asked wasn't just a request, it was a test of how much control he could have over me. And with Emily already on his side, I was standing on the edge of a very dangerous cliff. That night, I sat in my late husband's study, surrounded by the old books and photographs he'd loved. I traced my fingers over the spine of his favorite law journal, remembering how he used to say, "Contracts are traps if you don't read them carefully." A shiver ran down my spine. Daniel wasn't just asking. He was setting a trap. And he expected me to walk right into it. But I wasn't about to let him. Not without a fight. The weekend came faster than I wanted, and with it, Daniel and Emily. I tried to distract myself that morning by baking a pie, the way I used to when Emily was a little girl. Back then, the smell of cinnamon and apples could bring her running into the kitchen, all bright eyes and laughter. But now, as I pulled the pie from the oven, all I felt was a heaviness, like a storm brewing over my home. When they arrived, Daniel carried himself with an air of casual confidence, as though he already knew the outcome of a conversation we hadn't yet had. Emily, by contrast, seemed on edge, forcing cheerfulness that quickly crumbled into tension whenever I hesitated to agree with them. After dinner, as Emily cleared the dishes, Daniel leaned against the counter, his voice low, his smile practiced. "Mom," he said, "I don't want to push you, but the bank paperwork is ready. All it needs is your signature. Once that's done, everything will move quickly." I kept my hands busy with the pie, pretending not to hear the steel in his tone. "Daniel, I've already told you. My house is not something I can gamble with." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You make it sound so dramatic. It's not gambling. It's business. And in business, opportunities don't wait around. If you care about Emily and the kids, this is your chance to show it." His words lingered in the air like smoke. When Emily returned, she carried the conversation forward, her voice pleading this time. "Mom, please. Daniel has worked so hard for us. This business could give us security, stability. Don't you want to help us?" I looked at her, at my own daughter, and saw not just desperation but persuasion carefully planted by her husband. I wanted to cry out, to shake her and tell her she was being used. Instead, I swallowed my grief and said quietly, "I love you, Emily. But I will not sign my house away." The silence that followed was sharp. Daniel's jaw tightened, though his lips curved in a smile that felt colder than ice. "Well," he said finally, "I guess you need more time. But don't take too long. Cars can be tricky, you know. One day they work, the next day, who knows? Accidents happen." The fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the plate. I looked up sharply, but his expression was perfectly innocent, as if he'd just made a passing remark about mechanics. Emily didn't seem to notice the undertone. She only sighed, frustrated, and muttered something about me being stubborn. But I heard it. I heard the threat beneath the smile. That night, I checked the locks twice before going to bed. I sat in the darkness of my room, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. Accidents happen. Was he warning me? Or was he telling me what would happen if I didn't comply? The next morning, when I went to start my car, the engine sputtered strangely. It still ran, but not as smoothly as when he had fixed it. A cold wave of suspicion washed over me. Had Daniel tampered with it again? Was he letting me know just how much control he had, not only over my daughter but over my independence? I drove cautiously, every creak and groan of the old sedan sending my heart into my throat. By the time I made it home, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. That afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Green, stopped by with her little dog. She's the kind of neighbor who notices everything, who comes by with soup when you're sick and gossip when you're well. I hesitated, but something in me needed to tell someone. Have you ever gotten the feeling, I asked her carefully, that someone is pushing you into something you don't want to do? She frowned, her eyes narrowing in concern. Are you talking about Daniel? My heart skipped. Why do you say that? Mrs. Green leaned closer, lowering her voice. He's been asking around the neighborhood. About you. About your house. I heard him talking to Mr. Clark about property values just last week. Made it sound like he was already counting on this place. The blood drained from my face. It was worse than I thought. He wasn't just asking me, he was planning as if he already owned what was mine. That evening, Daniel called. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the warning in his words. You know, Mom, I can't keep waiting forever. The bank's deadline is closing in. I don't want you to regret missing this chance. You wouldn't want things to get complicated. Complicated? I repeated, my voice steady though my hands shook. He laughed lightly. I just mean, life is unpredictable. Best to make choices while you can. After he hung up, I sat in silence, the phone still warm in my hand. I realized then that this wasn't about family or business. This was about power. He wanted control, and he thought fear would hand it to him. But he underestimated me. I might have been old, but I wasn't naive. I'd lived through enough storms in my life to recognize one brewing. Daniel thought he could smile his way into my home, that he could use my daughter as leverage and my fears as shackles. He was wrong. If he wanted a battle, I was ready to fight. Sleep became a stranger to me after Daniel's thinly veiled threats. Every creak of the old house sounded louder at night, every gust of wind against the window felt like a warning. My heart pounded constantly, not just from fear, but from anger. He thought he could scare me into submission. He thought my age made me weak, that I would fold the moment pressure weighed heavy. But he had underestimated me. I decided that if Daniel wanted me cornered, I would find out exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. And so, one crisp morning, I pulled out a notepad, wrote his name at the top in big letters, and began my own quiet investigation. The first place I turned was the courthouse. It had been years since I'd walked those marble steps, but the records department still smelled of old paper and dust. I asked for any filings under Daniel's full name. The clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, tapped away at her computer before disappearing into the back. When she returned, she carried a small stack of folders. Quite a bit here, she said, raising her eyebrows. I took them to a table, my hands trembling as I flipped through page after page. Lawsuits. Debt collection. Small claims. Unpaid contractors. Failed business ventures registered under different names but always tied back to him. Each record was another stone added to the wall of truth. Daniel wasn't unlucky. He was reckless. One case stood out, a foreclosure notice from just 5 years ago. He had nearly lost the house he and Emily lived in now, saved only because a relative had co-signed the refinancing. My heart ached at the thought. Did Emily know any of this? Or had he hidden it from her the way he tried to hide his intentions from me? Next, I visited the library, where the local newspaper archives hummed softly in their microfilm reels. Hours slipped by as I scrolled through stories of small-town scandals and bankruptcies. And there he was, a younger Daniel, smiling stiffly in a grainy photo beside a half-built storefront. The article read, Local contractor abandons project, leaves business partners in debt. According to the article, Daniel had promised investors a new auto shop but disappeared halfway through construction, leaving suppliers unpaid and his partners drowning in bills. No criminal charges had been filed, he had blamed unforeseen circumstances, but the damage had been done. I leaned back in the chair, my hands shaking. My son-in-law had a trail of destruction behind him, and now he was setting his sights on me. That evening, I called an old friend, Clara, a retired accountant who had once helped me file taxes after my husband passed. She answered with her usual warmth, and after some small talk, I asked carefully, "Clara, do you know anything about Daniel's business dealings?" There was a pause. "Why do you ask?" "Because he wants me to sign over my house for one of his loans." Another pause, then a heavy sigh. "Oh, sweetheart. I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you this, I've heard his name whispered in connection with more than one shady scheme. He's persuasive, I'll give him that. But people like him, they never stop taking once they've started." Her words confirmed what I already knew deep down. Fueled by anger, I went further. I spoke quietly to neighbors, asking innocuous questions. Mrs. Green told me she had overheard Daniel bragging about flipping a property soon. Mr. Clark mentioned Daniel had offered him an investment opportunity that sounded suspiciously like a scam. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. Daniel wasn't just ambitious. He was dangerous. He didn't build, he consumed. He preyed on trust, cloaking his greed in charm until he drained his victims dry. And now he wanted to consume me. But I wasn't finished. One evening, when Emily brought the children over, Daniel stepped outside to take a phone call. While he was gone, I asked Emily, "Honey, has Daniel ever told you about the foreclosure?" Her face went pale. "What foreclosure?" "The one on your house, 5 years ago." She blinked rapidly, shaking her head. No, he said it was just refinancing. He told me his cousin offered to co-sign because it was easier that way." I swallowed hard, realizing how deep his lies ran. "Emily, I've seen the court papers. It was foreclosure. He nearly lost your home." Her lips parted, her eyes filling with confusion and disbelief. But before she could speak, Daniel came back inside, smiling that same hollow smile. And in an instant, Emily straightened, her doubt hidden away, her loyalty back in place. My chest tightened. He had such a hold on her, stronger than truth, stronger than love. But now I had something he didn't know, evidence. That night, I gathered everything I had, copies of the lawsuits, printouts of the newspaper articles, notes from my neighbors. I placed them in a folder and tucked it into the drawer of my husband's old desk. As I sat there in the dim light, I felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. Daniel wanted me scared. But the more I uncovered, the less afraid I felt. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't trapped. No, I had the truth. And I would use it to fight back. But first, I would let Daniel believe he was winning. Let him tighten the noose with his arrogance, let him grow comfortable in the illusion of control. Because when the time came, I would pull that rope so tight around him, he'd never see freedom again. For now, I closed the drawer and whispered to the empty room, "Your move, Daniel." The folder of evidence sat hidden in my late husband's desk, its weight heavier than any stone. Knowing the truth about Daniel gave me a strange kind of strength, but it also carved a canyon between me and my daughter. Every time I looked at Emily, I wanted to shake her, to force her to see what I saw. Yet each time she walked through my door, her eyes glowed with that blind devotion to him, and I knew the truth would only sound like poison coming from my lips. Still, the tension was boiling too high to contain. One evening, Emily came by without Daniel. She looked tired, her face pale under the porch light. She carried a casserole dish, the way she used to in better times, but her hands trembled slightly as she set it on the counter. "Mom," she said softly, avoiding my eyes, "Daniel says you're still resisting." The word stung. Resisting. as though I were some disobedient child rather than her mother. I am protecting myself, I corrected firmly. This house is my security. It's the last piece of your father I have. I will not risk it for a loan that may never be repaid. Her eyes flickered, torn between love for me and loyalty to him. You don't understand. This is our chance. If the business takes off, we could finally pay off debts, move somewhere better, give the kids more than just scraping by. Why won't you help us? I wanted to scream, because he's lying to you. Because every dream he sells is another scam. Because he'll drag you down until there's nothing left. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I whispered, Emily, don't you see? He's using you. And now he's trying to use me too. Her face hardened instantly. That's not true. You've always been suspicious of him. You never gave him a chance. I rose from the table, my voice breaking but strong. A chance? Emily, I went to the courthouse. I saw the records. He's been sued for unpaid debts, for failed businesses. He nearly lost your house in foreclosure. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you he left business partners bankrupt? She froze, her mouth opening slightly before closing again. I saw a flicker of doubt, just for a heartbeat. But then, as if on cue, she shook her head fiercely. No. That's not true. He told me everything. You must have misunderstood. He said people were jealous, that they tried to drag him down. And now you're repeating their lies. My hands gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Emily, I have proof. Paperwork. Court documents. Do you think I would lie to you? Her voice rose, thick with tears. I think you hate him so much you'd do anything to drive us apart. You don't care about our future, you only care about yourself. The words sliced through me like a knife. My own daughter, the child I had carried and raised, now standing in front of me like a stranger, accusing me of selfishness when all I had ever done was give. I sank into my chair, the fight draining from my body. Emily, I whispered, tears blurring my vision, I have given you everything I could. I am not the enemy here. Please, open your eyes. But she shook her head, tears streaming down her face. If you can't support us, then maybe we need to step back for a while. Daniel thinks it's best if we give you space. Maybe then you'll realize what you're throwing away. She grabbed her purse, her shoulders stiff, and walked toward the door. I stumbled after her, calling out, Emily. Please don't let him do this to us. Please don't let him turn you against me. But she didn't look back. The door slammed shut, and the sound echoed through the house like a death knell. I stood in the empty hallway, shaking, my chest tight. For the first time, I felt truly alone. My daughter, my flesh and blood, had chosen him over me. The betrayal was deeper than anything Daniel could have inflicted himself. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. Sobs racked my body, the kind of sobs that don't cleanse but poison, heavy, bitter, and suffocating. My husband's photograph stared down at me from the mantel, his steady eyes reminding me of the strength I had forgotten I carried. Why did you leave me to fight this alone? I whispered to the empty room. But then, somewhere beneath the grief, a spark ignited. A memory surfaced, my husband, years ago, when we'd faced losing the house during a recession. I'd been frantic, terrified, but he had looked at me with calm certainty and said, we don't bow to fear. We fight smarter. Always smarter. And suddenly, I understood. Daniel thought he had won. He thought he had turned my daughter against me, broken my resolve with loneliness. But grief has a way of sharpening resolve. If Emily couldn't see the truth now, then I would bide my time. I would gather more, prepare more, until the evidence was undeniable. I wiped my tears, my hands steady once more. You won't take this from me, Daniel, I whispered. You think you've cornered me. But you've only made me stronger. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Not because the storm had passed, but because I had found my purpose. This was no longer just about saving my home. It was about saving my daughter. And Daniel was about to learn that he had underestimated the wrong woman. The days after Emily's visit were some of the darkest I'd ever known. My daughter's absence cut deeper than any insult Daniel had thrown. The silence in my house seemed to mock me, whispering that I had lost her, that Daniel had won. But grief is a strange teacher. It strips you bare, and once there is nothing left, it leaves behind something harder, sharper. I remembered my husband's words, always smarter. That became my mantra. If Daniel wanted a war of manipulation, I would play his game and beat him at it. The first step was patience. I knew Daniel expected me to resist until exhaustion wore me down. What he didn't expect was for me to pretend to surrender. So when Emily called me a week later, her voice cautious and strained, I let my own sound tired, uncertain. Maybe I was too harsh, I said softly. Maybe Daniel is right. I can't do everything alone forever. There was silence on the line, and then a rush of relief in her voice. Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand. Daniel will be so happy to hear this. The ache in my chest nearly broke me, hearing her joy at what she thought was my surrender. But I held my voice steady, even managing a small laugh. Don't tell him yet. Let me talk to him myself. We'll arrange something. When I hung up, I pressed my shaking hands against the table. The first move was made. The next time Daniel came over, I welcomed him with tea and cookies, as if nothing had ever happened. He seemed surprised, even cautious, but his arrogance quickly returned when I said the words he'd been waiting for. Daniel, I've been thinking. Maybe I should consider your offer. Maybe signing the house over temporarily isn't such a bad idea. His eyes gleamed like a predator catching the scent of blood. That's wonderful, Mom. I knew you'd come around. I smiled faintly, hiding the disgust that churned in my stomach. Of course, I'd need to see the papers first. I'm old-fashioned, you know, I like to read things carefully. Of course, he said smoothly, already pulling out his phone. I'll get everything drawn up. You'll see, it'll be simple. Just a signature, that's all. While he talked, I studied him carefully, memorizing every flicker of greed in his eyes. He believed he was moments away from victory. That was his weakness, the belief that the battle was already won. That night, after Daniel left, I took out the small recorder I'd bought years ago to capture church sermons when my hands were too arthritic to take notes. I placed it in my handbag. From now on, every conversation with Daniel would be preserved. The following week, he returned with preliminary documents. He laid them out on my kitchen table, his smile wider than ever. See, he said, pointing to the legal jargon. It's all standard. Just sign here, and the house will transfer to my name for collateral. Once the loan clears, I'll transfer it back. Easy. I leaned forward, pretending to squint at the words. The recorder in my bag captured every syllable. This line here, I said innocently, says something about foreclosure. What happens if the business doesn't succeed? His smile flickered, but only for a second. Don't worry about that. It's just standard language. Nothing will happen to you. You trust me, right? The way he asked, that same testing phrase, you trust me, right? Nearly made me laugh out loud. Instead, I nodded slowly. Of course. I trust you. He left that night convinced I was ready to sign. But what he didn't know was that I had taken the papers straight to a lawyer the next morning. A kind, sharp-eyed woman named Margaret, recommended by Clara. She examined the documents with a frown. This isn't temporary, she said firmly. If you sign this, he'll have full ownership rights. If his loan defaults, the bank will seize your house. You'd be homeless. I closed my eyes, my fears confirmed. Margaret leaned closer. You did the right thing bringing this to me. Do not sign anything. In fact, if you let me, I can help you build a case against him. Fraud, coercion, elder abuse, there are legal protections for people in your situation. Her words were a balm to my spirit. For the first time in weeks, I felt not only hope but power. Still, the trap needed to be carefully set. If I moved too soon, Daniel would deny everything. He was slippery, practiced at twisting lies into truths. No, I needed him to incriminate himself fully and willingly. So I played the part of the frail, confused mother-in-law. I called him with questions about the paperwork, letting my voice sound hesitant. I just want to be sure I'm not signing my home away forever, I'd say. And each time, he'd reassure me, layering on promises and lies. The recorder captured it all. Meanwhile, Margaret helped me draft documents of my own, protections that would keep my deed safe, no matter what tricks Daniel tried. We prepared quietly, building a wall of evidence around me while I pretended to let my guard down. One evening, as Daniel left after another friendly visit, I stood by the window watching him swagger to his truck. Emily waited inside, her smile soft and trusting, utterly blind to the darkness beside her. My heart ached for her, but my resolve hardened. You want to play games, Daniel, I whispered into the empty room. Fine. Let's play. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something dangerous bloom inside me, satisfaction. Because Daniel thought he was leading me to the edge of a cliff. But what he didn't know was that I was the one digging the pit below. And soon, he would fall into it headfirst. The morning Daniel chose for our final meeting dawned gray and heavy, as if even the sky sensed the storm that was about to break. I woke before the sun, nerves buzzing through my body, but also with a strange calm. Everything was ready. The documents Margaret had prepared were neatly stacked in my bag, alongside the recorder full of Daniel's own incriminating words. I stood before the mirror, brushing my thinning hair, and thought of my husband. Always smarter, he had said. I whispered it to myself one last time. Today, I would prove him right. Daniel arrived with Emily at his side, both dressed a little too neatly for an ordinary visit. Emily clutched a folder, no doubt the deed transfer he was so eager for, while Daniel wore the smirk of a man who believed the game was already over. Mom, Emily said brightly, though her voice trembled, today will be quick. Just some signatures, and then we'll be on our way. I forced a smile, feigning frailty, even confusion. Of course, dear. I've been thinking about this a lot. Anne. I suppose you're right. Maybe this is best for the family. Daniel's eyes gleamed. He pulled out the chair for me at the kitchen table, all gentlemanly charm, and laid the papers out in front of me. See? Nothing scary. Just a few lines to sign, and you'll have done something incredible for your daughter and grandchildren. He pushed the pen toward me. I picked it up slowly, letting my hand tremble, as though weighed down by doubt. Before I sign, could you just explain one more time? I don't want to misunderstand. This won't mean I lose my house, right? He leaned forward, voice low and silky. Of course not. It's just collateral. Nothing changes for you. You'll still live here. Trust me. I glanced at Emily, who nodded eagerly. See, Mom? It's fine. You're just helping us. For a moment, the ache in my chest nearly made me falter. My daughter truly believed his lies. But then, I remembered the faces of every neighbor who had warned me, the court records, the foreclosure papers. No, I couldn't let pity weaken me now. I set the pen down. My voice hardened. Daniel, you're lying. His smile faltered. What? I pulled the recorder from my bag and pressed play. His voice filled the kitchen, calm, confident, unmistakable. It's all standard. Nothing will happen to you. You trust me, right? Emily froze, her eyes darting between us as the recording continued. Daniel's own words poured into the room, his reassurances now twisted into the noose I had prepared. Mom, what is this? Emily whispered. I didn't answer her. Instead, I pulled out the folder of court documents and slid them across the table. Here's what happens when people trust Daniel. Lawsuits. Debt. Foreclosure. He's done this before, and he'll do it again. But not with me. Daniel's face darkened, the mask slipping completely now. You've been digging into my past? His voice was sharp, venomous. Yes, I said steadily. And I've shown everything to my lawyer. Copies of these documents, and recordings of every promise you made me. If you push this any further, Daniel, you won't just lose a loan. You'll face fraud charges. Elder abuse. Coercion. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Daniel, is this true? He snapped toward her, his charm gone. Don't listen to her. She's just trying to tear us apart. She's always hated me, always wanted to control everything. Enough. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound startling even myself. My voice shook, but with rage, not fear. You will not manipulate me, and you will not use my daughter any longer. Get out of my house. For a long, tense moment, the kitchen was silent but for the sound of Emily's ragged breathing. Daniel's face twisted, his confidence crumbling as the walls closed in. He gathered the papers with shaking hands, stuffing them back into his folder. This isn't over, he hissed. You'll regret this. No, I said coldly. You will. When the door slammed behind him, Emily collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Mom. I didn't know. He told me, he made it sound like. I knelt beside her, taking her hand. I know, sweetheart. He's clever. But now you see him for what he truly is. She sobbed into my shoulder, and though my heart ached for her pain, relief washed over me. At last, the veil had lifted. That night, I handed everything, the recordings, the documents, my written account of his threats, to Margaret. She promised to move swiftly, filing reports with the authorities. You've done more than protect yourself, she told me. You've stopped him from preying on anyone else. Her words lit a fire of satisfaction in me. For the first time in months, I slept without fear. But Daniel's threat echoed in my mind, this isn't over. And deep down, I knew he wasn't finished yet. Still, the trap had been sprung. The hunter had become the hunted. And the next move would not be mine. It would be his, and it would seal his downfall. The days after the confrontation felt strangely quiet, as if the house itself was holding its breath. For the first time in weeks, I could sit at my kitchen table without feeling Daniel's shadow looming over me. Yet beneath the calm was a current of anticipation. I had set the trap, and Daniel had walked right into it. Now it was only a matter of time before the consequences reached him. Margaret, my lawyer, wasted no time. She filed a complaint with the state for attempted fraud and elder abuse, submitting the recordings and documents I'd gathered. She also sent copies to the bank Daniel had been courting for his loan. They won't touch him now, she assured me. No reputable institution lends money to a man with this kind of evidence against him. It was a relief, yes, but more than that, it was a kind of vindication. Daniel's weapon had always been his charm, his ability to convince others he was trustworthy. But the mask had slipped, and now the truth was written in ink and preserved on tape. He couldn't smile his way out of this one. The first crack appeared in the neighborhood. Mrs. Green told me she'd overheard Daniel arguing loudly with a man outside his truck. The man had been promised payment for some contracting work, but Daniel had nothing to give. Word spread quickly, small towns have a way of magnifying whispers into shouts. By the end of the week, people crossed the street rather than greet him. Then came the business partners. 2 men showed up at my door one afternoon, polite but visibly agitated. They asked if I had seen Daniel recently. I told them no, though I knew he was still living under Emily's roof. They exchanged a look and said bitterly, "He owes us money. Promised us returns on an investment that never existed." I wanted to tell them everything, but Margaret had advised me to keep quiet. "Let the law handle him," she'd said. So I simply nodded, offering them tea and sympathy, while inside I felt a grim satisfaction. Emily, meanwhile, grew quieter with each passing day. She still visited me, often with the children, but her once defensive tone was gone. I could see the cracks spreading in her loyalty to Daniel, though she hadn't yet admitted it out loud. One evening, as she sat on my couch while the children played, she finally whispered, "Mom, you were right." Tears filled her eyes as she continued, "I confronted him after you showed me the papers. He didn't even try to deny it. He just yelled, said I should have stayed out of his business. When I asked him about the foreclosure, about the lawsuits, he told me I was ungrateful. That everything he did was for me. But I know now, it was always for himself." I pulled her into my arms, my heart aching with both sorrow and relief. "You see him clearly now," I whispered. "That's all I ever wanted." She nodded against my shoulder. "I don't know what I'll do. But I can't stay blind anymore. Not for me, not for the kids." It wasn't the complete break I longed for, but it was the beginning. Daniel's downfall accelerated when Margaret arranged a meeting with a state investigator. They came to my house, took statements, and assured me the case was serious. If he pushes this any further, the investigator said, he could face criminal charges. At the very least, his reputation is done. And indeed, his reputation collapsed swiftly. Contractors refused to work with him. Neighbors whispered. Old debts resurfaced. Even at Emily's church, where Daniel once held court with his easy charm, people turned cold. But Daniel didn't fade quietly. No, he came back one last time. It was late evening when I heard the knock. I opened the door to find him standing there, his smile gone, his face hard and desperate. "You think you've beaten me?" he growled, stepping inside without permission. I stood tall, my fear long replaced by resolve. "I don't think, Daniel." "I know." He sneered, pacing like a caged animal. "You've poisoned Emily against me. You've ruined my business, my name. You think that makes you safe? You're old, weak. Without me, you'll be alone. And when you're gone, what do you think happens to all this?" He gestured around the house. "It'll be mine anyway." I let him rant, then calmly pulled out my phone. "The authorities already have everything. Every word you've said. Every threat you've made. Keep talking, Daniel, it only digs your hole deeper." For the first time, I saw true fear flicker in his eyes. He backed toward the door, his bluster collapsing. "This isn't over," he muttered, but the words rang hollow now, more like a man begging himself to believe it. When the door shut behind him, I sank into my chair, shaking, not with fear, but with victory. Within a month, Daniel's world had crumbled. The bank blacklisted him. His creditors closed in. The state opened a formal case for fraudulent misrepresentation and attempted elder exploitation. Emily, finally seeing him for who he was, packed his things and threw him out. I heard later from Mrs. Green that he'd left town, muttering about fresh starts somewhere else. But fresh starts don't erase a trail of ruin. Wherever he went, he would carry his own downfall with him. As for Emily, she returned to me, humbled and heartbroken. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said one evening, her voice breaking. "I should have trusted you. I let him blind me." I held her close, whispering, "He fooled many people. But now, we're free of him. And that's what matters." The house felt lighter after that. No more threats. No more manipulation. Only peace, hard-won and deeply cherished. For the first time in months, I could sit on my porch, watch the sunset over the roses my husband had planted, and breathe without fear. Daniel had come to me thinking he could steal my home, my security, my dignity. But in the end, all he lost was everything he thought he controlled. And I had gained something far greater than victory. I had regained my daughter. The weeks that followed Daniel's departure were strangely quiet. For so long, his presence had loomed like a storm cloud over my life. Now, the silence felt like sunlight breaking through. The phone no longer rang with veiled threats. My car started without strange noises. The tension that had hung between Emily and me began to soften, replaced with tentative conversations, shared meals, and slowly, trust. But Daniel's shadow wasn't gone yet. Justice moves slowly, like a river carving stone, but it does move. Margaret kept me updated on the case. The state's Elder Abuse Division had opened an official file against him, citing coercion, attempted fraud, and harassment. The bank had not only denied his loan but reported his suspicious behavior to other institutions. Contractors he owed money to came forward with complaints. Slowly, the walls closed in on him. One morning, I sat at my kitchen table sipping tea when Margaret called. Her voice carried a quiet satisfaction. They've issued a warrant. Daniel will be facing charges. Attempted exploitation of an elderly person. He won't be able to charm his way out this time. For a moment, I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. Relief came not as a rush, but as a deep, steady calm. It wasn't revenge for the sake of cruelty, it was justice. And justice felt like freedom. Emily struggled in the aftermath. She had to face not only the betrayal of her husband but the shame of how she had defended him, how she had doubted me. One evening, after putting the children to bed, she came to sit beside me on the porch. The night was cool, stars scattered like diamonds above us. She clasped her hands in her lap, her voice barely a whisper. Mom, how do I forgive myself for believing him? For almost helping him take everything from you? I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Emily, love blinds us all at times. Daniel was skilled at making lies sound like promises. What matters is you see the truth now. And you came back to me. That's enough. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I shook my head. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about love. And no matter what, you'll always be my daughter. We'll heal together. For the first time in months, she leaned her head on my shoulder, just as she had when she was a little girl. The ache in my chest eased. The wound wasn't gone, but it was beginning to close. News of Daniel's downfall spread quickly. People who had once been fooled by his easy smile now whispered about his lies. At the grocery store, I overheard two women muttering, "Did you hear about Emily's husband? Tried to steal his mother-in-law's house." Can you imagine? Their judgment wasn't cruel, but incredulous. Daniel had built his image on charm, and now that mask was shattered for good. When I saw Mrs. Green walking her little dog, she gave me a proud smile. You handled him better than anyone else could have. You didn't let him win. I smiled back, though my voice was humble. I just did what I had to do. But inside, I felt a quiet strength. I hadn't just survived Daniel. I had outsmarted him. The final confirmation came months later, when Margaret called again. He's taken a plea deal, she told me. Fraud, harassment, attempted elder exploitation. He'll serve time, and his record will follow him for life. I thanked her, my heart steady. The fight was over. That night, I sat by the fireplace, the warmth crackling softly, and let myself reflect. Daniel had entered my life through something as simple as a car repair. He had thought kindness could be turned into leverage, gratitude into control. But he hadn't counted on resilience, on the quiet fire that grows in someone who has already weathered life's hardest storms. He had tried to strip me of my dignity, my home, my bond with my daughter. Instead, he had lost everything: his reputation, his family, his freedom. And I had gained something stronger than victory. I had gained myself back. One Sunday afternoon, Emily and the children came over for dinner. Laughter filled the house again, the kind I thought I might never hear here. The children ran through the hallways, their giggles echoing, while Emily and I prepared a meal side by side. At the table, my grandson asked innocently, "Grandma, why don't we see Daddy anymore?" The room grew quiet, and Emily's eyes met mine. I smiled gently at the child. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, people make choices that aren't good for the family. But we're safe now. And we'll always have each other." His little head nodded, satisfied with the answer, and soon he was back to eating his food. I caught Emily's gaze again. She mouthed the words, "Thank you." Later that night, after they had gone home, I sat alone in the quiet house. But this time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. I looked around at the walls my husband and I had built together, the pictures of a life shared, the roses blooming outside in the garden. Daniel had thought he could take it all. But this home, this life, my dignity, they were mine. Untouchable. I whispered to the shadows of the room, perhaps to my husband's memory, perhaps to myself. I won. We won. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to smile.